Hello everyone, welcome to yet another tutorial. Today we are going to look at how to create a ball bounce on the spot in Blender. So you can see that I am using a background image and there is a shadow catcher plane. So we have soft shadows of the ball bouncing. We have motion blur and depth of field. Alright, so with just two objects, let's see how we can achieve this effect in Blender. In Blender, we will delete the cube and delete the light. And we'll go to add mesh UV sphere, add mesh plane. We will scale the plane big and we will move the ball up by 1 meter because the ball is 2 meter size. Alright, so we'll go to object, shade smooth. For the material of the ball, I'm using some material that image texture. Just find any material that goes for a ball. I'm using this material, okay, for the ball, the globe material. For the plane, we go to object properties, visibility, and before we do that, we have to go to cycles because the shadow catcher only work with cycles. So we go to visibility and we need shadow catcher. Okay, so if you click on that, if you render, you will not see the plane. Alright, so it's difficult to see what I wanted to show, so we will go to add a background and we are going to use an environment texture and we have to use an hdri image. I'm using this Stone Alley image. So if you go to the viewport shading mode, you will see that there is shadow and the plane is not visible. So the plane is selected, and if you remove the shadow catcher, you see that the plane has a shadow. And if you turn it on, then the plane disappears but the shadow stays. Okay, so if you go to the environment and select an hdri image which has proper sun in it, either this or this, then you will see that the shadow is much more pronounced. Okay, and as the ball moves, let's select the ball and move it up, you can see that the shadow is more clear. So we can use this if you want. Now I'll hit the 1 key so we can go in the side view and we will go to add mesh armature. Add armature. Okay, and we go to object properties and viewport display. We will say in front, so you can see the armature. We will scale the armature to each so it is as big as the ball. Okay, now I'll select the ball, shift select the armature, control P to parent and click on object. And now when you scale the armature, the ball scales. So this is how we'll create squish and stretch. The thing is that the ball maintains its volume when it is squishing and stretching. Okay, So that is what we want. So now we will animate the ball. So we'll select the armature, hit the, and then we will only animate the Z position. So we'll move the ball 6 meters in the air, and on frame number 1 we will right click and say insert single keyframe. Alright, so only this property gets animated. We'll make a 1 second long animation, which is 24 frames per second. So at frame number 12, the ball hits the ground. I think the ground is 0. Insert keyframe. And at 24, we can simply shift D this and copy it. Okay. So if you hit the space bar, now the ball is bouncing, but it is only bouncing once. So we'll make the ball bounce continuously. So if you click here, go to graph editor, make it big. You can see that the ball is moving slowly in air, then picks up speed, but it slows down. We don't want the ball to slow down. So click here, right click, handle type, vector. So the ball is slow and then it picks up speed. Boom, it hits the ground and then bounces back and slows down as it goes up. Okay, so to see this, I will undo this. Let us keep it default. Select this, go to channel, extrapolation, cycles. Alright, so now the animation will continue. So if you hit the space bar, you can see that and then what we will do is we'll hide the armature. Okay, so the ball doesn't look like, I will go back to our smooth shade mode so we can see how the animation is. Okay, so it doesn't look like the ball has any weight. So if you select the armature, and then as I mentioned before, if you select, right click, go to actually channel, extrapolate, handle, this was right actually, handle type, vector. Okay, and now you can see that the ball has, I'll hide the armature again. You can see that the ball has weight now. Okay, so this ball looks more realistic. So the ball is made up of very light material, so we can further simply fix this a little bit. Okay, so we will give it less weight if you want. Alright, so you can control how the ball bounces. We can make the ball stay in air for longer, so you can simply stretch this out, select this one and stretch this out, so the ball stays in air for a long time. Okay, so it makes it little lighter in feel. So that is done. Now we need to do squish and stretch. So at frame number 0, the ball is round. At frame number 12, it will squish. So at frame number 0, we will right click and say insert single keyframe for the scale value. At 12, it will be 1.5. Insert single keyframe. Okay, at 0 we can shift D this, at 2 replace single keyframe. Okay, 2 frames before we want the ball to be round and still on the ground. Okay, so we'll go to insert single keyframe, make this 0 and say insert single keyframe. 2 frames after 0, insert single keyframe, to insert single keyframe. So the ball is in the air and then it hits the ground at 9. It squishes. And you can see that we have some weird bouncy happening here. So we'll go here and flatten this curve. Okay, and then here we want the ball to bounce. So we'll go to handle type vector, handle type vector. Then we can slightly make it lighter. Okay, so these keys you can play with these keys. So what is happening now is the ball is, and we didn't extrapolate this to cycles. So the whole thing happens again and again. Okay, so the ball is on the ground for a longer time, so it hits the ground, then it squishes, and then it becomes normal. But 2 frames before that, so at, this happens at 10, so at 8 we can now stretch. So we can insert single keyframe, and this key will be copied 1, 2 frames, insert single keyframe. Okay, so the ball is full. After some time it stretches, then it hits the ground where the ball is round, then it squishes, then it stretches, then it becomes 0 again. What you can do is when it is hitting the ground, it can stay stretched. So we can make it 3 here and replace single keyframe. So when it is going down, it touches the ground when it is stretched and then squishes, and then it releases it. So it is slightly different, the curve, when it is hitting the ground. Okay, so that gives the ball a nice squish and stretch. Okay, so we have animated the Z position and the Z scale of the ball. Alright, now you can also select the ball itself and rotate it for rotation animation if you want. So at 1 we will insert single keyframe. At 12 we can make it 90 and insert single keyframe. At 24 uh, actually at 12, either we have to shift D this and go back. So we will have the ball going round and coming back, or we can do a 180 here, replace, and 360 here. Okay, and then we can go to timeline. These are the rotation keys. Select that, go to graph editor, go to view, and frame selected. So because the number is big, it's difficult to see, so you can go to view selected, select these, and again you can go to extrapolation and make it cycle. Or you can do a constant. Channel linear. Okay, so if you don't want the rotation, you can. I didn't add the rotation in the video, so let's just trying that. This becomes too much. Do a rotation of 90. Then it doesn't loop. And if it is 0, then it goes back. How about this? Type 90 here. I will simply remove this. Delete keyframe. So there is no rotation. You can decide which part of the globe you want to see in the front. Alright, so now we have our animation, we have our plane, we have our background. Now we can go to the camera view, camera to view, and decide what kind of framing we want to do for our animation. So this is too big. And then if you go to shading, go to world, select this and hit Control T, and this is only possible if you go to edit, preferences, and search for node wrangler and turn it on. Alright, so now you can look at the camera, see what you're seeing, and then you can rotate the Z and decide what type of camera view you want. Okay, so for example, I will go with this. Now the next thing we want to do is depth of field. So select the camera, go to camera properties, turn depth of field on, go to viewport display and turn mist on, hit the M key and deselect the camera to view, so we know how far is this X. We want to focus on the ball, so the X has to be on the ball, so the distance is approximately 20, whatever that distance is. So you can go back to 0 and f-stop goes to say 0.1, and you can see everything else has blurred out, so it's too much, so 0.3 or 0.2. So you can blur out the background so that we can focus on. We can hide this armature, it's not necessary. And then if you go to the cycles renderer, we can turn the denoising on and we can turn the motion blur on, and it's not visible in the viewport, but if you go to render, before we render it, we go to render settings and make it 1280 by 720. So render image, and we get motion blur and we get depth of field. Okay, so I'll select the ball, go to properties, and I'll reduce the roughness so the ball is shiny. We can select the plane and go to visibility, and if you turn on diffuse and glossy, you can see that the ball was getting the glossiness from the plane, so you can hide that. Okay, and then to render this thing out, you have to go to output, save, where do you want to save it, go to desktop, 3D assets. Actually, I'll save it in my Blender folder, ball bounce, call it street ball, whatever name you want to give it. We want to end it at 24, so start at 1, end at 24 frames per second. Output type is PNG. I will change it to FFmpeg, and then the encoding I will change it to, from medium quality I'll make it high quality. Okay, it is set to H264, and that's it. You go to render animation. So we got ball having squish and stretch, motion blur, depth of field, and a shadow catcher material for the ball to look like it is on the street. So in the next tutorial, I'm going to cover how to create a ball bounce in 360. Okay, so again it is an HDRI image. We have a shadow catcher, we have ball bounce. However, we are rendering it using a panorama camera, and then we have to add some metadata to our animation and then upload it on YouTube, or you can upload it on Facebook so that you can have a 360 view, and you can even watch it on the VR headset. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much.